Tom Petty broke down in 2017, only weeks before his death. He informed his best friend about the day that tormented him for years. It took place in 1979. Tom moved away from someone who was dying. He didn't go back. He said it was the most cowardly thing he had ever done. The shame stayed with him through every song, every tour, and every relationship. He tried to dull it with medicines. Nothing worked. What he did that day will make you cry. It tells, music, everything about why he lived the way he did. Tom Petty was born on October 20, 1950, at 51 p.m. in Gainesville, Florida. Kitty, a local tax office worker, and Earl, a traveling salesman who was barely ever home, were his parents. Their house was in a quiet neighborhood called the Duck Pond. It was full of old Victorian homes and mossy trees, and it appeared like a nice place from the outside. Things were anything but tranquil inside the tiny home, though. Earl, Tom's dad, had a drinking problem and a nasty temper. The beatings had already started by the time Tom was 5 years old. Tom damaged the fin of a gleaming 1955 Cadillac by accident while playing with a catapult in the yard one day in 1955. The driver, who was mad, went straight to their residence. Kitty whispered to him, "This is bad. Your father isn't going to like this." When Earl returned home that night, he pulled off his belt and beat his son until his body was covered in raised welts from head to toe. Kitty and Tom's grandma put him on the bed, took off his clothes, and used cotton and alcohol to clean up his wounds as he wailed. It wasn't the last time. Tom learned how to hide from his father when he was close by. His mother made him feel better. Kitty was quiet, nice, and loved music. She taught him country tunes and often had a radio on nearby. But her life was harsh. She suffered cancer and epilepsy that were caused by music. And she quietly put up with Earl's angry moods. Years later, while Tom was playing with his band, Mudcrutch, the family went fishing. Earl drank too many beers on the way back and slammed his automobile into another car. Everyone passed out. Kitty's health never got better. After that day, she got weaker and more withdrawn. Tom stated he realized she was slipping away long before Mom died on October 21, 1980, only one day after Tom's 30th birthday. When Tom turned 10, everything changed again. In the summer of 1961, his uncle Earl Jernigan worked in the movie business and accompanied him to witness a movie shoot in Ocala. Elvis Presley was the star of the movie Follow That Dream. Hundreds of people flooded the streets to see what was going on. Then Elvis came out looking like a god and went right past little Tom, stopping just long enough to shake his hand. Tom stood there, unable to say anything. That moment was like a bolt of lightning. When he went home, he gave his friend Keith Harbin his slingshot in exchange for a full stack of Elvis 45s. Then he locked himself in his room and played them again and again. His parents thought there was something wrong with him, but he didn't care. He had found something that was stronger than fear. He had discovered music. Bruce, Tom's younger brother, was born in 1957, 7 years after Tom. The family was already falling apart by the time Bruce could walk. Earl's job was not stable. He lost money, drank more, and brought home less. There was a lot of yelling in the home. Bruce learned that if he kept his head down and played sports, he wouldn't get hit. Tom used music and TV to get away from it all, but they weren't enough to keep him safe from what he saw. He saw his mother get weaker because of her illness and his father's rage. It left a scar that never truly went away. Tom was 14 years old in 1964, and that was when he got the chance to transmute all that misery into something new. Cindy, a girl from Howard Bishop Junior High, asked him if he knew of a band that could play at the dance. He said yes, but he was lying. Then he got some friends together and made one. They were known as the Sundowners. They practiced in a wooden shed next to their house, where they used old carpet to keep the sound in. They won a Battle of the Bands event that summer and began playing on Friday nights for $100 a show. That February, the Beatles had just been on the Ed Sullivan Show, and everything changed. Tom heard me say, "I want to hold your hand" at the teen center and said I didn't have to be Elvis. He only needed a guitar and some music to play. But in 1966, things with the band got bad. They were getting ready for a show at the Delta Upsilon fraternity home, which is close to the University of Florida. Tom and his drummer Dennis Lee got into a brawl. Words become threats in music. Dennis smacked him in the face hard and then kept beating him. The fraternity guys cheered as Tom was beaten to the ground. When she witnessed the damage, his mother grieved all night. The Sundowners were over after that. Earl got Tom his first guitar from Sears for $35, but he never understood him. Earl wanted a son that was tough, enjoyed sports, and went hunting. Tom wasn't like that. He was silent, deep in contemplation, and absolutely obsessed with music. It only got stronger after the Elvis moment. It felt like the world turned from black and white to color when the Beatles came to America. Tom and 75 million other people saw them perform on Ed Sullivan on February 9, 1964. He sat through all of the comedy skits eager to see them play again. From that night on, everyone around him knew that something had changed. Tom Petty was planning to be a singer. He graduated from Gainesville High School in 1968, no matter what. He played in bands and allowed his hair grow long, which made people look at him funny around town. Tom met a guitarist named Mike "Music" Campbell after the Sundowners broke up. They clicked right away. They got together to perform music and created Mudcrutch with a few other local lads, notably Ben Montench, a classically educated keyboardist with a great ear. They played all throughout Florida, worked on their sound, and practiced music at a rundown farmhouse on NW 45th Avenue that they called Mudcrutch Farm. It was more than just a name. It was a residence. Tom was only 19 years old and running the band full-time by 1970. They made their first single in 1971 and began to gain a tiny audience. The tunes were weird and soulful, more like the Grateful Dead than the top 40 hits in Gainesville. In the autumn of 1970, they got a steady job at Dub's Steer Room, a boisterous pub featuring topless dancers and loud crowds. They played every night of the week at 9 p.m. until 2 a.m. for $100 a week, which is more than some of their parents made. They worked on the University of Florida's grounds department throughout the day, doing landscaping duties in the heat of Florida. After work, they practiced at the farm and then played at Dub's all night. It was quite hard. It didn't stop. It was the only way they could stay alive. They held a music event at Mudcrutch Farm in 1972. A lot of people came. The police didn't stop it. That made them feel good about going bigger. They had a second one for Halloween. This time, it blew up into a mess. People used drugs. Some people assumed they were in a Clockwork Orange. Officials burst in, yanked out the wires, grabbed drumsticks, and turned it off. Fans who were angry tore down the sound towers and set them on fire. The band had to leave. Mudcrutch was once again without a home. Tom's focus never wavered, no matter what. He married his high school sweetheart, Jane Bino, on March 24, 1974. Their daughter, Audria, was already on the way. She would be born on November 28 of that year. At 1618 NW 1st Avenue, they resided above a barber shop and a laundromat. Friends would come over, smoke weed and listen to records there. Tom sang his songs for Mike Campbell at the table in the kitchen. But Jane started to get tired of the little room, the noise at night, and Tom's single-minded fixation with music. She felt alone even when he was home. Tom Petty was only 23 years old when he left Gainesville, Florida in August 1974. He only had a demo cassette, a few pals and $100 he borrowed for petrol. Mudcrutch wasn't a well-known band. They were just a bunch of Florida guys looking for a sound. They drove across the nation to Los Angeles, crammed into a car with their instruments and hopes. They didn't have a plan, but they believed that the music would guide them. It almost did. As 7 record companies offered them studio time based on that terrible recording alone within their first week in LA, but they didn't sign right away. They got a call from producer Denny Cordell and went to Shelter Records in Tulsa to record demos for 20 hours straight, all at once. It was noisy, hot, and crazy. By spring, they were back in LA. In August 1974, Shelter signed them. Shelter originally set the band up at the Hollywood Premier Motel. Tom thought of it as a cheap hooker joint, which wasn't exactly what a rock star would want. Finally, they moved into Canoga Park houses with swimming pools and no furniture. Tom said it felt like royalty. "We brought all the girls, pets, and everything else, anyway. This was a lot, man. A house with a pool. Florida had never been this crazy before." The swampy heat of Gainesville and the frenzied glamour of LA were very different, but they were also very exhilarating. It felt like anything could happen. It didn't last long. Mudcrutch broke up at the end of 1975. There were 3 songwriters in the band, and they couldn't get used to being in the studio. Tom lived in LA alone in a modest $6 a night music hotel, living off a Shelter publishing retainer. Then, in early 1976, something unexpected happened. Benmont Tench got some time in the studio and asked some old pals from Gainesville to come over and play. Petty came by, heard the music, and knew it right away. That was the noise. Mike Campbell plays guitar, Tench plays keys, Stan Lynch plays drums, and Ron Blair plays bass. Petty joined them, and they recorded Strangered in the Night in the same way. He quickly took the tapes to Cordell in Malibu, and things moved quickly. They recorded 15 songs in 15 nights in June 1976. Every afternoon, Tom wrote, at 9:00 p.m., the band would arrive and they'd work until sunrise. 1 song per night, no breaks. It was raw and exhausting. They called themselves Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And they had no idea what was coming. Their debut album dropped on November 9, 1976. It sold only 6,500 copies in the first 3 months. Breakdown flopped, but then early in 1977, they opened for Blondie at the Whiskey. The critics went wild. That led to a UK tour in the spring, opening for Neil Slogren, and everything exploded. American Girl and Anything That's Rock and Roll took over British radio. The crowds lost their minds. Tom remembered landing in London at 7:30 in the morning and facing a full press swarm. It never slowed down. For 2 months, they, Music, were chased across the UK. Girls stormed the stage. Security couldn't keep them back. They weren't just opening anymore. They were, Music, headlining. When they re-released Breakdown in late 1977, it hit then 40 on the Billboard chart in 1978. The thing that flopped the first time was now the thing pulling them back up. Music. In March 1979, Shelter Records got sold off to MCA. The moment it happened, Tom Petty felt betrayed. He had a clause in his contract that said, Music, he had to be consulted before anyone could sell his name to another company, but no one called him. Suddenly, MCA owned him. He said he wouldn't be bought and sold like meat. Music, so MCA sued him. They locked him out of recording, performing, or signing with anyone else. They tried to bury him with lawsuits, 9 of them. At the same time, Petty went into the studio and started recording anyway. He didn't ask for permission. He paid out of pocket, racking up more than $500,000 in recording costs for what would become Damn the Torpedoes. On May 23, 1979, with nowhere else to turn, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. His debts were $576,630. His assets were just $56,845. But the move voided his contracts and forced MCA to come to the table. One terrified record executive told Billboard, "If this works, every artist will try it." Music, and it worked. Petty got to renegotiate. He kept creative control, but everything around him was falling apart. His marriage was crumbling. Jane Bino, whom he'd married in 1974, was mentally unstable and already struggling with addiction. She called constantly. Sometimes she threatened suicide if he didn't stay on the phone. Their daughter Audrey saw it all. Years later, she would call her mother cruel and verbally abusive. But in 1979, Tom didn't leave. He threw himself into work instead. On October 19, 1979, Damn, Music, The Torpedoes came out. It hit number 2 on the Billboard 200. It went triple platinum. Songs like Refugee, Don't Do Me Like That, and Here Comes My Girl played everywhere. The album was raw and honest, recorded during legal chaos and emotional exhaustion. Petty later said there was a sense of persecution that year. Lawsuits, pressure, and pain surrounded every note, but it all cut through. By 1980, they had sold over 3 million albums. Bassist Ron Blair had money now. So did the rest of the band. But success, music, brought pressure. The music got more professional, more uptight. Blair started fading away. He couldn't stand the endless touring, the bad sound systems, the meaningless hotel rooms. By 1982, he was gone. Petty told the Gainesville Sun that Ron had vanished from their lives long before he quit. We didn't see him socially ever. Back in 1981, MCA tried to raise the price of the next album by $1 from $8.98 to $998. They called it superstar pricing. Petty was furious. He said he didn't need the extra dollar and neither did MCA. He threatened to pull the album or rename it $8.98. A record store in Los Angeles announced a boycott. MCA folded. On May 5, 1981, Heart Promises came out, music, at $8.98. It went platinum. The waiting hit nor 19. On the cover, Petty stood in a record store. Bins behind him all labeled 8.98. But nothing was easy anymore. Petty spent 18 months trying to record Southern accents. He wanted it to be a double album about the American South. He recorded it in his own basement studio, obsessing over every vocal. He tried to sing in a Southern accent, but it came out forced like a cartoon. During one session, after hearing a raw take of Rebels, music, he snapped. He punched the wall, broke his hand, his fingers were crushed. At Cedars-Sinai Hospital, music, doctors inserted pins and told him he might never play guitar again. He had to undergo electroshock therapy just to get his hand to close. Dave Stewart and Robbie Robertson helped finish the album, but Petty couldn't hide how much it hurt. The 1985 tour used the Confederate flag, music, as stage decoration. It was tied to the song Rebels, meant to show the mindset of a Southern character. But fans took it differently. They waved, music, flags at concerts. Petty realized too late what he had started. Music, in North Carolina, he stopped the show mid-performance and called himself, Music, Stupid. Years later, in 2015, he said the flag should never have represented them. It was a downright stupid thing to do. At the same time, cocaine filled the studio. Petty said they had too much time and music, many drugs. Stan Lynch called it dancing with the devil. Mike Campbell once snorted something he thought was coke. It shut down his stomach and put him in the hospital. It was the wildest they ever were. In the middle of it all, Petty fired Ron Blair and brought in Howie Epstein on September 1, music, 1982. 20 years later, Epstein would die from a heroin overdose. That same year, Jane gave birth to their second daughter, Anna Kim Violet, but she was slipping deeper into addiction. Petty once found her passed out while their baby slept in another room. By 1984, he knew he had to leave, though their divorce didn't become official until 1996. Even after that, she'd still call him late at night, screaming outside his house. Audria said later that being married to someone mentally ill for so long had destroyed her father. And just when things started to calm down, Petty got pulled into controversy again. In 1985, MTV aired the video for Don't Come Around Here No More. Petty, dressed as the Mad Hatter, cut Alice into music pieces and served her as cake. Viewers were stunned. Some called it cannibalistic. The outrage helped fuel the PMRC's push for music censorship, but the song became his biggest music crossover pop hit, climbing to number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. In April 1988, George Harrison needed a B-side for his single This Is Love. He was with Jeff Lynne and Roy Orbison in LA, but didn't have his guitar, so they stopped by Tom Petty's house to grab it. That one stop changed music, everything. Harrison asked Petty to come along. They headed to Dylan's garage studio in Malibu. They recorded one song called Handle with Care, named after a label on a cardboard box. When Harrison took the tape to Warner Brothers, the execs told him it was too good for a B-side. He needed a whole album. So, the group became a band. Harrison, Petty, Lynn, Orbison, and Dylan. They called themselves the Traveling Wilburys. They found Orbison right before a show at the Celebrity Theater in Anaheim and asked him to join. That night, they watched him sing his heart out while punching each other in excitement. Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 came out in 1988 and sold over 3 million copies, hitting number 3. The five of them felt like kids again. 1 year later, everything got bigger and messier. On April 24, 1989, Full Moon Fever came out. It reached number 3 and stayed on the charts for a full year. It went quintuple platinum with over 5 million copies sold. Free Fallin' reached number 7. I Won't Back Down hit number 12. Running Down a Dream climbed into the top 30, but it didn't come easy. MCA Records refused to release the album at first. They said it had no hits. The president of MCA, Irving Azoff, resigned soon after. The next team reversed the decision, but inside the band, cracks were forming. Mike Campbell had played almost everything on the album with Jeff Lynne producing. Music, Stan Lynch felt it was the start of Petty going solo. He was right. Music, even though they toured together, something had shifted. Petty said the album's success made him feel like a nice guy for about a year. But it also changed the balance. Then Howie Epstein began slipping. In 1991, during the Into the Great Wide Open sessions, they recorded at Studio C and Rumbo Recorders for $600 a day. But Howie couldn't keep it together. He was using heroin, showing up late, music, disappearing. The band found out he was stealing money from the studio to buy drugs. They had to confront him. It worked for a little while, but nothing held for long. Still, the music came through. Learning to Fly spent 6 straight weeks at number 1 on the mainstream rock, music, tracks chart, tying the waiting from 1981. The title track's music video starred Johnny, Music, Depp. It looked like success, but inside things were unraveling. Between July 1992 and April 1994, Petty poured everything into Music, Wildflowers. He called it the divorce album. Jane was gone by then, but the wounds were fresh. Producer Rick Rubin said Petty didn't want to leave the studio. It was the only place he, Music, felt safe. He recorded 26 to 28 songs, but Warner Brothers made him cut it to 15. That decision haunted him. When the album came out in November 1994, it sold 4 million copies by Music, spring 1995. You don't know how it feels, and it's good to be king played constantly on MTV. Petty later told Rubin he didn't understand how the album turned out so good. He said he couldn't make another one like it if he tried, but the sadness behind it was real. After the divorce was finalized in 1996, Petty collapsed into heroin. He didn't talk about it publicly. He used quietly, numbing himself. Dana York came into his life and slowly pulled him back. Meanwhile, Traveling Wilburys Volume 3 came out on October 29, 1990. They skipped Volume 2 on purpose just to mess with people, but it wasn't the same. Roy Orbison had died of a heart attack in December 1988. The group recorded Volume 3 as 4 instead of 5. Music, Dylan kept showing up late. Studio time was rushed. The album hit number 11, but it didn't have the soul of the first. Critics noticed, Music, the vocal blend wasn't as rich without Orbison. They joked about touring on an aircraft carrier playing only in the sun. But it never happened. The group dissolved quietly. Both albums disappeared from print until Rhino Records reissued them in 2007. By then, Harrison had died, too. In April 1999, Tom Petty stood on stage singing a song called Room at the Top. He told fans it was about feeling all right. Music, he said he had over $1,000 in the bank, but he didn't sound all right. He sounded broken. The lyrics weren't hopeful. They were, Music, tired. The album was called Echo. But it wasn't music echoing through his life. It was everything music else. His 22-year marriage had just ended in a bitter divorce. Jane, his first music wife, had started calling obsessively, screaming, threatening suicide if he hung up. Sometimes she showed up at night outside his house in Pacific Palisades, music, yelling until police arrested her. Tom filed a restraining order. Their daughter, Audria, later said, music, Jane was cruel to everyone. Still, the pain never left him. At the same time, his bassist, Howie Epstein, was disappearing into heroin. He barely made it through the Echo tour. By June 2001, Howie was arrested in New Mexico with his girlfriend, Carlin Carter. They had black tar heroin and were driving a stolen Jeep. Tom coaxed him into rehab in Miami. It didn't work. In March 2002, Howie showed up at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, weighing less than 100 pounds. Stan Lynch, one of the original Heartbreakers, said it looked like a little bag of dust had walked in. 2 months later, Tom had his manager fire him. He couldn't do it himself. They never spoke again. On February 23, 2003, Howie died in Santa Fe from heroin overdose complications. Music, he was 47. Tom said it tore his heart out. He said it felt like watching a tree die slowly. And then one day, someone just cuts it down. By then, Tom had been hiding something even darker. Around 1996, right after his divorce, he started using heroin, too. He was 50. He called it self-medication. Music, he didn't tell anyone. Not the band, not the fans, not even Dana, the woman who would later become his second wife. He used alone in hotel rooms during the highway companion sessions. He hated himself for it. He kept trying to quit. Cold turkey. Again and again, he said it was ugly. Dana found out eventually. She made him stop. She saved his life. They got married on June 3, 2001 in Las Vegas. Little Richard officiated, but the secrets didn't stop. Music, in 2008, Tom stood under the blinding lights of Super Bowl Say playing to 97.5 million people. It was the most watched halftime show ever at that time. He looked strong, confident, and untouchable. But behind that performance were fentanyl patches, oxycodone pills, and unbearable pain. His body was breaking down. Emphysema, knee surgeries, a fractured hip that wouldn't heal. He had trouble breathing, trouble walking. He kept performing anyway. He always did. He said, "Just get me to the stage and I'll be okay." But by 2010, the weight of everything was catching up to him. When he released Mojo, people noticed something different. One track, Running Man's Bible, was about Howie. He said he'd never been able to write about his death until music, then. He called it embarrassing, not because it was personal, but because it still hurt so much. The years of touring, the grief, the regret, they were all trapped in his body now. By 2014, Tom collapsed on stage with pneumonia. 17 shows were canceled. Doctors told him his lungs were destroyed. He had smoked 2 packs a day for over 40 music years. He couldn't do cardio without gasping for air. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. In 2015, during a European tour, Dana found him on the bathroom floor of the Savoy Hotel in London. He'd overdosed again. Heroin 3 days straight. She called the ambulance at 3:47 a.m. They gave him 2 doses of naloxone. That's what saved music him. He never told the public. It only came out years later. In therapy, he said he was a coward who ran from pain into needles. He meant it. The pain didn't just come from divorce and drugs. It came from guilt. His mother, Kitty Petty, died from cervical cancer in April 1979. He rushed to Gainesville Memorial Hospital to see her. When he walked in, her bed was covered in articles and clippings about him. She had taped his name to the walls. She was proud. Even though she could barely move, he looked at her and ran out of the room. He never came back. He didn't even go to her funeral. He sent his brother Bruce instead. He called it the most cowardly thing he ever did. And it wasn't just his mom. It was Stan Lynch. They'd played together for 18 years. Tom fired him in 1994 over creative disagreements during Wildflowers. Music, he never made it right. Stan needed patience. Howie needed tough love. He gave neither. He said it out loud near the end. I failed the people who needed me most. Even Jane, his first wife, never got closure. By 2010, she was, music, institutionalized full-time in California for depression and anxiety. He only visited her twice in 7 years. He couldn't face her. He wrote in his journal that he'd watched 2 women fall apart while he toured and ran. Music, he knew the pattern. He just couldn't break it. In April 2017, Tom began his 40th anniversary tour. It started in Oklahoma City. It ended at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. 53 shows across 3 countries. They sold over 637,000 tickets. Made over $61 million. On music stage, he was limping. Off stage, he was being carried in a golf cart. His hip was fractured. He didn't tell anyone. On the night of the last show, September 25, 2017, some fans noticed he looked tired. He smiled anyway. Just get me to the stage. 1 week later, on October 2, 2017, Tom was found unconscious at his Malibu home. He died that evening. He was 66. The coroner said it was multisystem organ failure from mixed drug toxicity. Fentanyl, oxycodone, temazepam, alprazolam, citalopram, acetyl, fentanyl, dyspropion, fentanyl. He had emphysema, knee problems. His hip had fully broken that day. His family believed the pain was unbearable. The medicine was too much. It was supposed to help. It killed him instead. A year later, Dana Adria and his bandmates released An American Treasure. It wasn't about hits. It was about memories, home movies, hidden tracks, lost lyrics. There was a 1982 song called Keep a Little Soul, and a fragile acoustic recording called For Real. He said, I did it for me because it was all that rang true. In 2020, Wildflowers and All the Rest came out. The full album, all 25 songs. Tom had always wanted it to be a double album, but the label said no in 1994. Now it was finally complete. In 2021, Finding Wildflowers gave fans alternate versions, rough cuts, the raw process behind the music. It showed how he worked, how he rewrote, how he searched for the right feeling, and he left behind more than music. Johnny Cash recorded I Won't Back Down in 2000, slowing it down, stripping it bare. They had worked together before. They understood each other. Both men had faced demons. Both had stood back up. Tom's death caused by fentanyl, music, a drug 30 to 50 times stronger than heroin, sparked warnings across the country. Doctors and clinics began using his story. His family said it was a music accident, but maybe it saved someone else.